This is about getting honest with yourself, really honest. Not the Instagram version of honest, where you share a vulnerable post and everyone tells you how brave you are. I'm talking about the kind of honesty that makes you squirm. Questions like, where did I contribute to the breakdown in my marriage? What patterns did I bring into this relationship from my childhood? What have I been avoiding looking at? This isn't about blame, it's about clarity, because you can't change what you can't see. I had to get really honest with myself about my role. I wasn't a victim, I was a participant. I had checked out emotionally years before the divorce. I had avoided difficult conversations. I had prioritized peace over truth. I became small. That awareness was uncomfortable, but it was also liberating because once I could see it, I could change it. Hello, and welcome to the Conscious Divorce Podcast, where we explore how endings can become new beginnings. I'm your host, Justin Milrad. Today's episode is Divorce, the best decision you never planned to make. Before we begin, here's a quick note. This podcast is designed to share ideas, stories, and insights from my years working in the mental health field, helping individuals navigate divorce, and from my own personal experiences. I'm not a therapist, attorney, or doctor, so this podcast is meant to complement, not replace, professional guidance from such qualified experts. If this episode helps you today, do me a favor. Share it with someone who needs to hear it, hit that subscribe button, and drop a review. It makes a huge difference in the number of people that we can reach and help. All right, let's go. I'm going to start with a personal story. We were the couple everyone wanted to be. I'm not exaggerating. People would tell us all the time, you two are relationship goals. I want what you have. We'd built something beautiful together, not just a marriage, but a life. A mental health treatment center that we started from the ground up. 3 beautiful kids. Something we both poured our hearts into. Something we both loved. We were partners in every sense of the word, in life, in business, in parenting, and in purpose. Until we weren't. That's when I learned that we were no longer connected. Not in the way that mattered, at least. Not in the way that sustains a marriage. And here's the thing. I didn't want to believe it. I fought against it. I tried. God, how I tried. I threw everything I had at repairing what was broken. I read the books, suggested therapy, initiated the conversations. I wanted so badly to fix it, to get back to where we'd been. But some things move too far past repair. Trust I couldn't move past, no matter how much I wanted to, and I think that's when I finally understood. Wanting something to work and it actually working are 2 completely different things. The complexity of it all, that's what people don't see from the outside. We weren't just untangling a marriage. We were untangling a business, a shared mission, a life we'd built brick by brick together. How do you separate your lives when your lives are so deeply intertwined? How do you divide something you both love? How do you explain to everyone who saw you as the couple that you are no longer that couple? They lose hope. Maybe you know that feeling, that realization that the life you built isn't the life you're actually living anymore. That despite your best efforts, despite wanting it so badly, despite how it looked from the outside, something fundamental has shifted. Something that can't be unshifted. The fear that washes over you when you start asking questions you've been avoiding. Is this really it? Can this be saved? What will people think? What about the kids? What about the business? What about everything we promised to everybody? Everything we built? Those questions kept me awake at night. They made my chest tight. They made me feel like a failure before I'd even done anything. Because here's what society teaches us. Marriage is success, divorce is failure. End of story. But what if that wasn't the entire truth? What if divorce isn't the end of your story, but the doorway to something extraordinary? What if the breakdown you're terrified is actually the breakthrough you've been waiting for? That's what we're talking about today. And I want to be clear, this isn't about making divorce sound easy or glamorous. It's not. It's messy and painful, expensive and humbling. But it can also be the most honest, courageous, and transformative decision you'll ever make. I call it stepping into you 2.0. It's the version of yourself that emerges when you stop performing and start becoming, when you stop shrinking and start expanding, when you choose consciousness over convenience. Now, just to be clear, crystal clear, I don't want to glamorize divorce. If a marriage can be saved, it should be saved. You should put in every effort possible to save it. But in some cases, it's the best option to move forward. In this podcast, we're going to explore why divorce gets such a bad reputation, what it really feels like to rebuild your life from the ground up, and how you can turn one of life's hardest moments into your greatest gift. So take a breath. You're not alone here. Let's dive in. Let's talk about the story we've all been sold. You meet someone, you fall in love, you get married, you stay married. Through good times and bad, sickness and health, better or for worse, until death do you part. That's the fairy tale. That's what success looks like. And if you can't make it work, if you choose to leave, well, then you failed. You didn't try hard enough. You gave up. You broke a sacred vow. But here's what nobody tells you. Sometimes staying is the real failure. I've worked with many people going through divorce. And you know what I hear over and over again? I stayed for the kids. I stayed because I didn't want to disappoint my parents. I stayed because I was afraid of what people would say, the judgment. And I get it. I really do. The judgment is real. People will have opinions about your life. It will become your identity for a period of time. The opinions will be loud and painful. Your family might feel betrayed. Your social circle might shrink. The whispers at school pick up. The awkward silence at parties. It's all real. But let me ask you something. How long are you willing to trade your peace for other people's approval? Something to think about. There's this metaphor I use with clients all the time, the hamster on the wheel. You know the one. Running and running, expending massive amounts of energy, going absolutely nowhere. That's what so many marriages become. You're moving, having conversations, making dinner, attending events, but you're not actually going forward. You're not growing as a couple. Rinse and repeat every day. You're just running in place, exhausted but stuck. And the really painful part, you can feel it, both of you. But neither of you wants to be the person who stops the wheel, because stopping the wheel means facing the truth, and the truth is terrifying. We've created this culture where we celebrate longevity over quality. We applaud couples who make it to 50 years, but we don't ask, were those 50 years happy? Did both people grow? Did they choose each other every day? Or did they just stay? I'm not saying commitment isn't valuable. It is. There is so much work in a marriage, and you constantly have to revisit and recalibrate. But conscious commitment, choosing to stay because you're both growing, because the relationship serves both people, because there's mutual respect and love, that's different from obligatory commitment. That's different from staying. That's different from staying because you're supposed to. Let me tell you something controversial. Staying for the kids isn't always the noble choice we think it is. Kids are incredibly perceptive. They feel the tension. They absorb the resentment. They watch how you treat each other, and they learn what love looks like based on your example. So when you model a loveless marriage, when they see you going through the motions, tolerating each other, living separate lives under one roof, what are you teaching them? You're teaching them that love means settling, that marriage means sacrifice without joy, that their own feelings don't matter as much as maintaining an image. Is that the legacy you want to leave? Now, I want to be really clear. I'm not advocating for divorce at the first signs of conflict. Relationships require work, lots of work. They require communication, compromise, and commitment. But there's a difference between working through challenges together and white-knuckling your way through the fundamental incompatibility. There's a difference between a rough season and a life that isn't yours anymore. And here's what I learned from my own experience and from coaching my clients through this transition. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself, for your partner, for your children is to consciously, respectfully, thoughtfully choose to separate and consciously uncouple. Not out of anger, not out of revenge, not out of impulse, but out of honesty, out of respect for the life you both deserve to live, out of recognition that love can change form without being less real. The world is slowly catching up to this truth. Look at the data. And I promise I won't get too academic here, but divorce rates have actually stabilized in recent years. And you know what's interesting? The divorces that are happening tend to be more thoughtful, more conscious, and more collaborative. Of course, I give a lot of credit to divorce coaches for helping with this. The model is changing. People aren't just running away anymore. They're making intentional decisions about their futures. They're asking themselves, what do I really want? Who am I becoming? Can I be that person in this relationship? And sometimes the answer is no. And that's okay, because the truth that no one wants to say out loud is divorce doesn't always mean something went wrong. Sometimes it means you both outgrew the container you created together. Sometimes it means you're both brave enough to admit that the story you started is ready for a new chapter. When I look back at my own divorce and marriage, I feel like we had a good run until we didn't, and then it was time to move on. So if you're sitting with that quiet knowing, that whisper that says, this isn't it, I want you to hear this. You're not broken. You're not a failure. You're not giving up. You're waking up. And that's where the real journey begins. Let me take you back to the hardest year of my life. The decision was made. We were getting divorced. And on paper, it was the right choice. We both knew it. But knowing something intellectually and living it emotionally, those are two completely different experiences. I remember moving out into an apartment, packing up my life into boxes, a life that we built together. Standing in what used to be our bedroom is now just a room. The art we've chosen together, the pictures we took together, the small mundane objects that somehow held entire chapters of our story. And I remember this wave of grief hitting me, not because I wanted to stay. I didn't, but because I was watching the death of a dream, the life I'd imagined, the identity I'd built, the version of myself that was married and stable and figured out, and all of it dissolving quickly. The first night alone in my new apartment, I'm not going to lie, I cried. I was in deep body shaking sobs, incredible sadness. Not for the relationship exactly, but for the loss, for the failure I felt like I embodied, for the uncertainty ahead. I felt like we failed each other and we failed our kids. And then in the middle of the darkness, something shifted. I remember sitting in the living room and this thought came to me. You get to build this from scratch. You get to decide who you want to be now. It was terrifying, but it was also empowering. Possibility. Here's what people don't tell you about divorce. Yes, it's painful. Yes, it's disorienting. Yes, there are moments when you question everything about yourself and your decisions, but it's also the most clarifying experience you'll ever have. Because when everything you thought was permanent gets stripped away, you're left with only the things that were ever truly yours, and that's yourself. And you get to ask, who am I without the role I've been playing? What do I actually want? What have I been tolerating that I never have to tolerate again? Those questions are gifts, painful gifts, but gifts nonetheless. I started to notice things I ignored for years, like how I stopped pursuing my passions because they didn't fit into our life, how I shrunk my dreams to fit the space available in our relationship, how I'd learned to walk on eggshells, to manage moods, to perform rather than just be. And slowly, I started to make different choices. I started working out again, not to look good for someone else, but because it made me feel alive. I started writing, something I'd abandoned years ago. I started saying no to social obligations that drained me, and yes to quiet mornings with coffee and a journal. I started showing up differently for my kids, not as the stressed, half-present dad who was always worried about keeping the peace, but as someone who was actively choosing to be there, fully there. And you know what? My kids noticed. They didn't need me to explain the divorce in perfect therapeutic language. They needed me to be real, to be present, to show them that even when life falls apart, you can put yourself back together better than before. That's when I understood the core truth that would become my life's work. Divorce isn't the tragedy. Living a life that isn't yours, that's the tragedy. Now, I'm not going to stand here and tell you it was all sunshine and breakthroughs. There were dark days, plenty of them. Days where I felt lonely, beyond words. Days when I questioned whether I made the right choice. Days when I had to sit with guilt that felt like it would crush me. But what I learned about guilt, it's often a sign that you're breaking an old rule. And sometimes old rules need to be broken. I felt guilty for breaking up the family. But then I realized we weren't breaking it. We were reshaping it. creating a new structure built on honesty rather than habit. I felt guilty for not trying harder. But then I asked myself, how many more years of unhappiness would I have to be going through? Could I ever get through the betrayal? I don't think so. How much more of my life should I have sacrificed? I felt guilty for wanting more, but then I understood wanting more isn't selfish. It's human. It's healthy. It's the engines of growth. Something I tell every client I work with: divorce can be the greatest blessing you never asked for. Not because it's easy, not because it doesn't hurt, but because it creates a rupture in your autopilot life. I'm going to say that again. Because it creates a rupture in your autopilot life. It forces you to wake up, to choose, to become conscious. You can't sleepwalk through a divorce. It demands your attention, your honesty, your courage, and your commitment. And if you meet those demands, if you choose to grow through it rather than just go through it, you'll discover something extraordinary. A version of yourself you didn't know existed, a clarity you've never had before, a strength you didn't know you possessed. That's you 2.0. Not a perfect version, not a version without scars, but a version that's more you than you've ever been. So let's talk about what you 2.0 actually means, because it's not just a catchy phrase. It's a framework for transformation. Think of it like this. You 1.0 is the version of you that got you here. The accumulated patterns, beliefs, behaviors, and identities that you've been carrying. Some consciously, most unconsciously. You 1.0 did the best it could with the tools it had. But you 2.0, that's the upgraded version, the one that emerges when you choose awareness over autopilot, when you take responsibility instead of assigning blame, when you commit to growth instead of staying comfortable. And here's the beautiful part. You don't need permission to upgrade. You just need willingness. The You 2.0 framework rests on 4 pillars: self-awareness, self-compassion, accountability, and growth. Let me break these down. First, self-awareness. This is about getting honest with yourself, really honest. Not the Instagram version of honest, where you share a vulnerable post and everyone tells you how brave you are. I'm talking about the kind of honesty that makes you squirm. Questions like, where did I contribute to the breakdown in my marriage? What patterns did I bring into this relationship from my childhood? What have I been avoiding looking at? This isn't about blame, it's about clarity, because you can't change what you can't see. I had to get really honest with myself about my role. I wasn't a victim. I was a participant. I had checked out emotionally years before the divorce. I had avoided difficult conversations. I had prioritized peace over truth. I became small. That awareness was uncomfortable, but it was also liberating because once I could see it, I could change it. Second, self-compassion. Here's where most people get stuck. They think awareness means self-flagellation. They beat themselves up for every mistake, every misstep, every moment they weren't perfect. But you can't heal from a place of self-hatred. Self-compassion means treating yourself the way you treat a good friend going through a hard time, with kindness, with patience, with recognition that you're human and humans are beautiful, messy, imperfect, with recognition that you're human and humans are beautifully, messily imperfect. When I started practicing self-compassion, everything changed. Instead of, I'm such a failure, it became, I made choices that didn't work out and I'm learning from them. Instead of, I'm broken, it became, I'm healing. That shift from judgment to compassion is everything. Third, accountability. Now, this is where self-compassion gets its edge, because compassion without accountability is just excuse making. Accountability means owning your part, all of it. The ways you showed up, the ways you didn't, the patterns you repeated, the growth you avoided. It means saying, I played a role in this. I have power here. I can make different choices going forward. It also means recognizing that while you couldn't control your ex, you can absolutely control how you respond to them. You can't change the past, but you can change how you show up in the present. I had to take accountability for my communication patterns, for the ways I withdrew when things got hard, for the times I chose silence over speaking my truth. That accountability didn't make me wrong. It made me powerful because it meant I could do things differently. Fourth, growth. This is the whole point. You're not going through this just to survive it. You're going through it to evolve through it. Growth means asking, what is this teaching me? How am I being invited to expand? Who do I want to become on the other side of this? For me, Divorce became a masterclass in emotional intelligence. I learned to sit with discomfort instead of running from it. I learned to communicate from a place of clarity instead of reaction. I learned to set boundaries, something I'd never really done before. And most importantly, I learned that I could trust myself, that even when my life fell apart, I had the capacity to rebuild it differently, better. Now, let me bring this into the most challenging arena, co-parenting. If you have kids, this is where You 2.0 gets real world tested every single day. Because co-parenting with your ex requires a level of emotional maturity that most marriages never asked of you. You have to communicate without the intimacy. You have to collaborate without the romance. You have to put your kids' needs ahead of your own resentment, disappointment, or hurt. It's hard. It's really hard. But it's also the greatest opportunity for growth you'll ever have. I remember the first few months of co-parenting. Every interaction with my ex felt loaded. Every text message felt like a potential battlefield. I was operating from hurt, from defensiveness, from ego. But slowly I started to shift. I started to see these interactions as practice. Practice in staying calm. Practice in communicating clearly. Practice in choosing peace over being right. And something remarkable happened. The dynamic changed. When I stopped reacting, she stopped escalating. When I led with respect, she started reciprocating. When I focused on the kids instead of the conflict, we both started to soften. It didn't happen overnight, but it happened. Let me give you 3 reflection exercises you can do right now. Pause the episode if you need to. Grab a journal, get honest. Exercise 1. Where in your life are you still on the hamster wheel? What are you doing out of obligation, out of habit, out of fear? What's not working anymore? Where are you expending energy without getting anywhere? Write it down, no judgment, just awareness. Exercise 2. What part of your identity are you ready to retire? Maybe it's the perfect spouse. Maybe it's the person who never asked for help. Maybe it's the martyr who sacrifices everything for others. What role are you done playing? What masks are you ready to take off? Exercise 3. What would your You 2.0 self thank you for doing today? Not someday, today. What one choice, one action, one boundary would your future self be grateful for? Do that thing. Because here's the secret. You 2.0 isn't something you become someday. It's something you practice right now, in small choices, in daily moments, in the courage to show up differently than you did yesterday. Let's talk about the reframe, the paradigm shift, a way of seeing divorce that changes everything. Stop thinking about divorce as a transaction, dividing assets, splitting custody, signing papers. Start thinking about it as a transition, an evolution from one form of relationship to another. Because here's what most people don't realize. You don't stop being in a relationship with your ex, especially if you have kids. The relationship doesn't end, it transforms. You move from romantic partners to co-parents, from spouses to collaborators in your children's well-being, from us to we're on the same team for these humans we created. And that requires a completely different skill set. It requires communication without intimacy, collaboration without romance, respect without affection. It requires you to consciously design what comes next instead of just reacting to what fell. I love this metaphor. Just as we upgrade our technology, our phones, our computers, our apps, we can upgrade our relationship and our emotional intelligence. You wouldn't use a phone from 2005 in 2025, right? It can't handle the demands of your current life. The apps don't work. The system is outdated. Sometimes relationships are the same way. They were perfect for version 1.0 of your life, but you've evolved. Your needs have changed. Your understanding of yourself has deepened. And trying to force the old relationship to work with your new operating system, that's like trying to run current software on outdated hardware. It's going to glitch. It's going to crash. It's going to frustrate everyone. Here's what I've seen over the years in my work. When people approach divorce consciously, when they release resentment, let go of guilt, and focus on creating something new, a magic happens. They rediscover parts of themselves they've forgotten. The creative person who stopped making art, the athlete who stopped moving their body, the dreamer who stopped dreaming. I've watched clients launch businesses they've been talking about for years, go back to school to pursue passions they abandoned, reconnect with old friends they'd lost touch with, find love again, deeper, healthier, more aligned love, discover hobbies, travel destinations, versions of themselves they never knew existed. And here's the thing. It's not that divorce made these things possible. It's that divorce removed the obstacles that were keeping them impossible. The pretending, the compromising of core values, the shrinking to fit into a life that was too small. Now let's talk about what this means for kids, because I know that's the big fear, right? I'm going to damage my children. Let me tell you what actually damages children. Watching their parents resent each other, living in a home filled with tension you think they don't notice, but they absolutely do. Learning that love means tolerating unhappiness. You know what doesn't damage children? You know what doesn't damage children? Watching their parents choose honestly, witnessing adults who can end a romantic relationship with respect and dignity, learning that it's possible to change your life when something isn't working. When you model conscious divorce for your kids, you're teaching them emotional literacy, how to name and process feelings, boundaries, that it's okay to leave situations that aren't healthy, self-respect, that their well-being matters, resilience, that humans can survive and even thrive through hard things, authentic communication, that truth is more important than appearance. Those are gifts, real gifts. I think about my own kids. In the beginning, they struggled. Of course they did. Their world changed. But you know what they tell me now? They're grateful. They're grateful they get two homes where people are actually happy. They're grateful they don't have to tiptoe around tension anymore. They're grateful that they have two parents who can sit at their school events and sports without making it weird, who can share holidays without fighting, who've learned to work together instead of against each other. Could we have gotten there if we stayed married? Maybe, but we didn't. And that version of partnership we have now, built on respect, clear communication, and shared purpose around our kids, it's healthier than what we had before. And frankly, it's better than the alternative. Here's the reframe I want you to leave with. Divorce is not about endings. It's about honest transitions. It's about releasing what no longer serves you so you can step into what does. It's about trading performance for presence, obligation for choice, resentment for peace. It's about believing that your life, your one precious, unrepeatable life, deserves to be lived fully, authentically, consciously. And sometimes that means making the hardest decisions you ever had to make. Sometimes it means being brave enough to say, this isn't working and I'm ready for what comes next. That's not failure. That's courage. That's wisdom. And that's you 2.0. We're coming to the end of our time together, and I want you to leave with this. If you're in the middle of divorce right now, I see you. I know it feels impossible. I know you wake up some mornings and you wonder if you're going to make it through the day. I know the doubt, the guilt, the fear that maybe you're making a terrible mistake. But I also know this. You're stronger than you think. You're more capable than you believe. And on the other side of this transition is a version of you that you're going to be so proud of. If you're contemplating divorce, sitting with that quiet knowing that something needs to change, I want you to trust yourself. Trust what you feel. Trust what you know in your bones, even if you can't quite articulate it yet. You're not crazy. You're not selfish. You're awake, and awakening is the first step to transform. And if you're listening to this episode because you care about someone going through divorce, thank you. Thank you for being curious instead of judgmental. Thank you for trying to understand. Your support matters more than you know. Here's the core truth we've explored today. Divorce is not about endings. It's about new beginnings. It's not about failure. It's about honesty. It's not about giving up. It's about growing up. And it's not the tragedy society has taught us to fear. It's the doorway to you 2.0. The version of you that's been waiting. The version that's more authentic, more alive, more aligned with who you really are. So I'm inviting you right now, today, at this very moment, to step off the hamster wheel, to stop running in place, to choose consciousness over convenience, to ask yourself, what do I really want? Who am I becoming? What does my you 2.0 look like? And then courageously to take one step in that direction. Just one step. That's all. That's all it takes to start. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your courage. Thank you for your curiosity and your willingness to see divorce differently. If this episode resonated with you, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. These conversations matter. Your story matters. You matter. Your transformation matters. I'm Justin Milrad, founder of Reclaim and Reboot Transformational Coaching. If you want to dive deeper into the U 2.0 philosophy or explore how coaching might support your journey, visit me at www.reclaimandreboot.me. You can also find me on Instagram and Facebook at Reclaim and Reboot. Check out You 2.0, Divorce: A Better Way Forward, and the accompanying workbook on Amazon.com. And remember, growth is always possible, no matter where you started, no matter how broken things feel right now, no matter what anyone else thinks. You get to write the next chapter. Make it extraordinary.